Hey folks, I'm Chad Conway, the Agricultural Natural Resource Agent here at the Knott County Cooperative Extension Service. Just want to welcome y'all to our cold crops and cover crops class this year. It's going to be a virtual class today again. Unfortunately, we're seeing a rise in the COVID cases, and we decided to offer this class virtual again this year. With this class, though, for those that are attending, fill out the short survey. You can get some cover crop seed available. Filling out the short survey that'll be on the link to on our website. So make sure you take a look at that after you watch the PowerPoint presentations on cold crops and cover crops today. And with that, you'll receive some cover crop seed to put over your garden this fall. And as you learn more about it, you'll know that time's coming up on us here real quick, especially fall gardening. And that's what we'll cover first today, fall gardening, talk about it some, and then we'll get right into talking about cover crops and the importance of those. If you have any questions, always, our office is open 8 to 4:30, Monday through Friday. We'll be glad to take calls. You can still come into our office at this time, and we're here to serve you. Of course, my email address is available on the website too, and you can email me questions, and feel free to give us a call here at the office for all your horticulture questions, anything related to agriculture and natural resources. I'll be glad to help you out. We do still do home visits and farm visits. So we answer questions many different ways by photos sent by phone. You can email me pictures as well, and I'll try to help out any way I can. So we'll get right into today's class. Like I said, I'll talk about fall gardening a little bit first today. Then we'll do a little bit on cover crops, and again, there'll be a short survey you can take on a link to, and you can follow it and complete it. And we'll make sure you notify you when the cover crop seed's available to pick up here at the office. Fall gardening, like I said, it's usually the 1st of August when we start thinking about that. Our summer crops start slowing down at the end of the day, end of the shorter days. We are seeing shorter days now, and as that happens, our summer crops tend to slow down on producing, and it's a great time to fall garden. Many people get kind of tired of gardening at this time of year, but this will be an opportunity for you to still have some fresh produce coming in, fresh vegetables all fall long, raising a fall garden with some cold crops. And those are basically, your cabbages, your broccoli, your greens, your mustard greens, all those, turnips and things like that. Those are your cold crops, and they usually like cooler temperatures when the nights start to cool down. We're seeing that already here at the 1st of August, and we'll have some more warm days, but they can handle that. And then, like I said, they really like it when it cools down in September, but we need to get that root system started and those plants up and growing before the cool weather really hits hard. So now between usually August 15th or 20th, no later than September 1st, you'll need to get if you're putting out greens or anything like that, lettuces, turnips, those time to get those out pretty soon. Like I said, a lot of folks tend to let their gardens kind of get a little weedy, and the care seems to get lacking this time of year. It was real hot last week. We've seen some temperatures up close to 100, and that's time that people don't want to get out in the garden and work in them and things, and kind of get burnt out on grass cutting and tending to a garden this time of year. But and the heat and humidity and weeds, all that seems to take over. So now's a good time to start cleaning up your gardens. If you're not going to do a fall garden, think about cover crops. But like I said, we'll talk about fall gardening some. There's still a lot of potential to growing a lot between now and Thanksgiving in the garden. Again, it's excellent quality of produce in the fall. Temperatures are cooler, less insect damage, less disease problems in the garden. With cooler temperatures, we'll get some tends to give you a lot less flavor in the fall with some of those cold crops. And again, you can still save a lot of money and still have a lot of fresh produce to come in during the fall. The vegetable, talk about, the green vegetables, which are a lot of those that we'll see in the as cold crops in the fall, have a lot of vitamin nutrition to them. This one here talks about just what kind of vitamins and minerals and fiber that we get from these greens. And this one's talking about broccoli here. The site selection, most of y'all, we've taken some of my other garden classes. I talk about site selection. We do need some sunlight this time of year, some real shady areas when the days get shorter and the cooler temperatures start hitting. We do need some sunlight, a little additional light, daylight hours, and make sure that it's not a shaded area during this time. Always, it's good to get a soil test done. That allows us to check for any nutritional defects that your soils may have, and we can help you get whether it be the pH or any, like I said, the phosphate, nitrogen levels, anything like that may be lacking in your soil up as well. Site selection, and you want to make sure when you're looking at a garden location, most importantly that it drains well, but it's not on a steep slope that we're going to see erosion. And this talks about soil testing here somewhat, and you're welcome to take a soil test from your garden, several different locations throughout your garden, and bring those in. We run those free of charge here at the office, and we get those back out to you and give you an idea of what your soils may be lacking. I won't talk about soil testing very much today, but when we do a soil test, we're looking at the pH level, the phosphorus needs, the nitrogen needs, the potash, the potassium needs of that soil, and even magnesium levels are very important to making sure that your garden produces the best it can, and it keeps it from being stressed out and causing disease issues. And we want to, if you're going to spend all this time and energy and resources raising a garden, we want to make sure that we have the soil in good shape to make you a successful gardener. So soil testing is very important. Have that done at least every other year, if not annual. And like I said, those are always ran free of charge here at the Knott County office. Talking about organic matter, just a little bit. Want to mention that to you today. Green manure, we have learned over the years that we can see some E. coli problems. We'll see some weed problems using green manures, whether it be horse manure or cow manure. Those are two that's recommended that we can use, and even some salmonella issues. So those need to be stored 120 days prior to putting on your gardens. So if you can pile that up and store it, that will definitely allow that to break down. It lets the temperatures help break down some of the weeds that may be in that manure. So if you're going to use manure, always store it for 120 days, then put it on your garden, and that'll definitely take care of any of those problems that you may have, such as E. coli, salmonella, or contaminations of any kind. We'll talk about composting. Talk about composting some as well. We'll probably do a composting class here in another couple of weeks, so be watching for that. that will give you some ideas on ways to compost and start some compost bins around your homes. But it's always good to put those materials on in the fall when you put your cover crop down. Uh, any compost materials, yard waste, anything like that. We do recommend that those be stored in a compost bin for at least 90 days before those are put onto the fields as well, to help any weed problems. And we can also pick up some diseases from compost as well. Soil preparation, as always, try to, especially when we're putting out greens in the fall, let's get those beds really tilled maybe a couple times when you're putting fine seeds out. Um, use a rake to break up those clods of dirt maybe. But definitely till over those, especially if we're putting out any type of greens in the fall. When you're thinking about putting out greens in the fall crops and getting those started, let's work that soil back up that maybe have set for a month or so and not had it tilled lately. Make sure when you're tilling that your soil's dry. We can do a lot of damage in compact soils when we're out in the fields working on when it's wet. So always try to make sure your soil's in good shape before getting into the fields to work it. Talk about crop rotations, always important. In the fall crops, we don't see importance of that as much because we don't see as much disease problems and insect problems in the fall. But talked about some of the cold crops that's ready to be planted soon is cabbage, cauliflower, kale. Like I said, the greens, Brussels sprouts are a good one. And then kohlrabi is something that we don't see a whole lot of, and it's growing in popularity to use in a lot of homes too. Onions do okay in the fall as well. Sometimes if you get in a good year, you'll have some good luck with peas. And then beets, Swiss chard, spinach is another one that we don't think about growing here in the area, but does well. Here's a chart that come out of our Kentucky Home Vegetable Gardening publication. Talks about latest safe planting dates. As you can see, we're past a lot of those dates for your summer crops, but we can still get some in. I usually tend to say we're looking around August 1st, no later than August 15th. These are pretty conservative dates for planting, but we can still get our cold crops in up till around August 15th, especially if we're talking about the plants. And you can pick those up at a lot of the hardware stores right now. They're starting to get on the shelves. Your cabbage, your Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, those type of things are on the shelves now. Of course, lettuces, you can start those from seed, and they still do pretty good this time of year. Growing times a little bit slower in the fall, but we're still, the maturity dates are pretty well accurate. A lot of this stuff takes a couple months, and that's why we have to get it started before we start seeing some frost. Your cold crops can handle a light frost down to about 28 to 30 degrees. They do okay in the fall, but once we get into those temperatures in mid-November, we start seeing some freeze temperatures. We'll see even some snow starting to fly middle of November, and that tends to be the end of the growing season, even with the cold crops. Like I said, a lot of these takes a couple months to mature. As you can look at cabbage, it says late June to early August for planting on those, 60 to 70 days on cabbage. Same with the broccoli on down here. Broccoli takes 60 to 80 days, and planting in July and August most of these fall crops is what's recommended, late July, early August. So we're harvesting most of these in usually in October up to November. Same with your greens that's listed here, your kale, your mustard greens, turnips. All those are around 2 months to harvest time. And again, July and August, even with leaf lettuce, we can go up to planting that a little bit later into to September. Like I said, Labor Day is pretty much the cutoff on planting greens for sure. And it all depends on, what type of fall we have and how early we'll see some hard freezing temperatures in November. So definitely time to start thinking about those fall crops. We can raise quite a bit of produce in the fall. So you've got opportunity to put some stuff away even in the fall. I mean, it's a great time to put up a lot of cabbage, make sauerkraut or what have you. This time of year when you're in the house in the cold weather, you may have more time now than you had in June and July when that cabbage was coming in. So still great time to can and freeze some stuff for winter. Peas are a little tougher in the fall. You're not going to get a bumper crop of peas, but if you're going to do peas, they really need to be put out now because they're a 60 to 70 day. Peas are usually 60 to 80 days, depends on the variety. But if you want to try a few, now would be the time to get those in the ground. Most folks anytime you want to give us a call, we can help you out with varieties. A lot of research trials that go on, a lot of varieties that tend to do better in this area and in our climate. So feel free to give us a call. A lot of your hardware stores are familiar with what does well and what sells good around here, and they'll be glad to help you out as well. But as always, our home vegetable gardening publication, if you don't have a copy of that, just call or email us and we'll get you a copy of that to you as well. You're welcome to utilize our Facebook page here at the Knott County Extension Office, and we can send you out anything that you need, or stop in and pick up any of our publications like our home vegetable gardening publication. Planting seeds, some of these seeds are going to be pretty small, so getting those in contact with the ground is very important. Using a rake or something to rake some of those small green seeds in. But a lot of our fall seeds are smaller seeds that we're going to be planting, especially your greens. Always, when you're looking at transplanting plants, go ahead and water those in to get them started, because we'll see some dry days in the fall, and getting those started is definitely important. I like putting mine out personally in the evenings, taking a couple of cups of water, putting down beside that plant, your transplants, and then putting dirt back around your plant, dry dirt, after you drop some water down in next to that root. So that gives it a chance to get a good start. But don't forget about them. If we don't get rain for a few days, you'll need to go back out and water those to help get a good root system started on your transplants. Most of your greens do like quite a bit of nitrogen, but basic fertilizer, side dressing those with whether it be a 10-10 or 6-12-12, whatever's available to you. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium is your 3 nutrients in a bag of fertilizer. So and that's what those 3 numbers is your nutrient content. So normally I recommend, just in general, a 10-10-10 fertilizer on cold crops. Weed control, we don't have to worry about that a whole lot in the fall. Getting it under control now will definitely help because weeds tend to have a lot of seeds popping up right now. Here's an example of a pigweed. It can have up to 100,000 seeds that'll germinate over the next 20 years. So once they get established, they're definitely harder to control. And if we let them go to seed, then we're going to see a lot more weed problems in the future. And it just doesn't happen the next year. It continues for several years. So those seeds can lay dormant and still continue to spread for up to 20 years. Weed control, we can do that a lot of different ways. We'll talk about cover crops, how important they are for weed control later, but grass clippings, straw is great to use in the fall. Make sure you don't use hay. Hay's really a little bit too heavy, too dense, and then also we'll see a lot of weeds in hay sometimes. So straw is definitely the choice I would recommend. Can use black plastics, landscaping fabrics, anything like that also work as well. Disease problems, we'll see a few disease problems. Just feel free to give us a call, send us a photo if you're going to see, if you start seeing some insect problems in the fall. We do have a couple organic insect control and fungicides that I've been recommending to gardeners for the last couple of years, and we've had a lot of success with them. And I tend to recommend the organic products if they're labeled for that insect first. And then if not, we'll use something else over the counter that y'all can pick up at your local hardware stores or box stores. Anytime that you do have an issue with the disease or insect, feel free to give us a call, and we'll try to find out what it is. If I can't determine it, we do have our plant disease diagnostic lab at UK campus, and I can send samples in of insects. We do a lot of digital insect ID with the digital microscope that we have here in the office, so we can get a lot of answers back to you pretty quick. Cabbage worms is one that we'll see some in the fall as well. So even though it's fall and we see less disease problems and insect problems, we still have those. And feel free to give us a call if you're starting to see those or want to be proactive and spray for them beforehand. Our gardening publication has a lot of recommendations, as you'll see. The side box talks about what chemicals work best, and that's off of our ID, our home garden vegetable publication. Spray equipment, as always, when spraying, make sure that you use gloves, goggles, all the protectants, and spray in the evening when possible. That helps our bees allowed to work during the day, but definitely try to stay away from spraying in the hot part of the day. That can be rough on our plants. And as always, make sure that you read your label completely to see how often you can re-enter and harvesting times before spraying. Some of our insecticides and fungicides you can go back in the next day and harvest. Some you have to wait 7 to 10 days before harvesting the vegetables. So that's important to keep in mind. We talked about some dates here. We do see the earliest frost in eastern Kentucky, so keep that in mind. Normally, our cold crops, as we talked about, they can handle temperatures down to 28 degrees, maybe even a little cooler sometimes. Depends on how long it lasts and so forth. But usually we do okay with crops up until 1st of November on our cold crops. Our summer crops, after that first frost, we're pretty well done with their tomatoes, corn, beans, peppers, all those. We can use some low covers or to help keep the ground temperature warming those plants at night. We see some cold temperature, so sometimes I'll recommend using some small hoops or ground cover to protect those plants, especially if we're seeing just one night or 2 nights of real cold temperatures. But so it does help hold that heat from the ground, from the daylight, and that heat that's in the ground on the plants if we're seeing some freezing temperatures overnight. As always, like I said, feel free to give us a call at the office on if you're looking for certain varieties, wanting to look having any disease or insect issues, and feel free to give us a call on any of your questions about cold crops, your summer crops that still may be growing this summer. And always check out our Facebook page for updates and things as well. And a lot of different resources. Like I said, I'll probably be teaching a home composting class this fall, backyard composting. We always do a class on raised bed gardens in the spring. Probably do that in January this year. And like there's a lot of different publications that we can send to you. We can email links to you and help you find any information that you may need about when it comes to gardening. And again, soil samples always free. And if you have questions about taking a soil sample, feel free to give us a call here at the office. We'll go into here in a moment. We'll go into cover crops, which is very important to our soil health, and talk about those. Okay, back with you. Talk about cover crops a little bit. These cover crops, it's almost time to start preparing our ground to plant cover crops. Cover crops are basically just a protection of our soil, helps build up soil health. And this presentation, give credit to Dr. Sean Wright, who works at our Robson Center for Agricultural Resources Sustainability at Quicksand. It's a research facility here in Eastern Kentucky that does a lot of trial studies on different crops, and he's very familiar with crops in Eastern Kentucky. For example, we still use that research station. They just got done with the watermelon trial study to help see which watermelons produce the best here in Eastern Kentucky. So he's currently working on that, and I follow his Facebook page and get updates by email about some of the research that's going on at the Robson Center Farm at Quicksand. As always, when we talk about any trade names, UK doesn't endorse any trade names or intend to imply that those products work better by their trade name. But sometimes in order to help folks find certain products, we'll have to recommend different trade names. And we usually, when I recommend one, I'll give you several different trade names to find certain chemicals or products out there. Talk about why we use cover crops. Several reasons. Here's a few of the main ones. We're building up the organic matter that we pull off of our garden each summer. We're pulling nutrients out of the soil when we're raising those crops. So we've got to look at ways to put it back in it. And cover crops is one of the cheapest, fastest, more of the organic way to help build up soil health. So we're building up the organic matter. Some of the cover crops that I'll recommend today help fix nitrogen in the soil, and they also help recover some nutrients. As we do that, we'll make sure these cover crops go back into the soil and help build up the soil. Another big reason, a key to it, is weed suppression. It really helps cover crops reduce the weeds because we're putting a barrier over that bare soil. And if we get these cover crops established well, then there's no chance for the weeds to start coming up and sprouting. So we're killing out the weed germinations that may start. Again, we're protecting the soil from erosion, and that's key as well. Because if we leave bare ground, anytime our soils lay bare, we're losing topsoil, and topsoil is very hard to gain back. So it's very important to utilize cover crops and to put one on your garden in the fall. A lot of different places to pick up cover crops, learn more about them. Southern Exposure Seed Exchange is just an example of an online resource that you can use for cover crops and grains. A lot of different types of cover crops, and I'll recommend for small gardeners today a couple varieties that I feel very comfortable. That's easy to manage in a small garden setting. When we get into bigger gardens and some more commercial operations, I'll switch that around, and if you've got access to mowing equipment, turning plows, tractors to use some of the bigger grains, then I'll recommend those. But for most backyard gardeners, small gardeners, this PowerPoint will help recommend a couple to you today. And actually one that will be given out will be annual ryegrass, and it does really good in the fall and helps do the purpose of what cover crops are intended for. Great thing about legumes, a lot of times I'll recommend mixing in some types of clover because they help build up nitrogen in the soil. They'll help establish that annual ryegrass as well because it's putting out nitrogen. The root system of clover puts out nitrogen into the soil, so it helps build your soil back up with nitrogen. And so white clover I usually recommend, whether it be Ladino or a Dutch or something like that. If we're talking about a larger scale garden, I would recommend a red clover, which gets pretty tall. I've seen red clover get certain varieties can get up to 2 to 3 feet tall, so it's really hard to take care of and manage unless you have a tractor with some implements. So usually I recommend white clovers. And then cowpeas are really good. Austrian winter peas are another legume that really helps build up organic matter, helps with the soil. And hairy vetch is good too. A lot of your family used to use a lot of vetch. A little harder to find now, but it can become a little more weedy because it tends to allow more sunlight in to help germinate weeds, so it's not as thick as your clovers would be. But you can find some of these Austrian winter peas and cowpeas as well if you want to look at going that route. But they are a little harder to get established. These white clovers really easy to get in contact with the soil and pretty easy to establish. Really, like I said, they are short-lived, but they do help build up nitrogen in the soil. White clover shorter tends to live a little longer than the red clovers. Austrian peas, a lot of people use these in food plots for deer. They are very high in protein, and deer tend to like the plant itself and even the peas. But a lot of folks use them in wildlife food plots for deer because they're a great source of protein for deer and elk and wildlife. Non-legumes, some of those that we tend to recommend to folks. Buckwheat is a good one. Buckwheat I like, especially if you're looking at letting it seed in the spring. The bees really like working the buckwheat and the mustard. Tillage radish, if you got a lot of soil compaction and want to break up that soil, there's tillage radish, and you'll see some of those throughout the PowerPoint. Grasses, the rye and the wheat, cereal rye and wheat tend to be make a very massive cover crop, and you really need a tractor to either cut those in the spring and till them under with a plow. And so I recommend folks with larger gardens and a tractor access to those. Annual ryegrass is one of my favorites and goes to for backyard gardeners, and that's one we'll be giving out a pound of to each person that has the opportunity to fill out the survey. Buckwheat, like I said, it tends to have a lot of bloom to it in the spring, chance for bees to feed. It makes a darker honey. It's kind of a more of a bitter honey. If you like the dark honey, planting some buckwheat just for bees is a great ideal, and you can find that seed at a lot of your hardware stores, or they can help you find it to order as well. They could probably order it for you. Mustard does great as well as a cover crop. Gets really tall, so it's a little bit harder to take care of in the spring, but it makes a great cover crop, and it's also gives them out some pretty color in the springtime too. Tillage radish, we've seen these planted on a lot of strip jobs to or reclamation sites, mine land to help break up the soil. As you can tell, they get a couple feet long, get very big. They help break that soil compaction up if you've got issues with soil compaction or some poor soil that you want to try to improve. These are a go-to for those type of reasons. Just talking about those a little bit, they can winter kill. They're not very recommended in traditional garden settings, but like I said, reclamation sites put these in their seed to help break up the soil compaction some, and they're pretty tough. They can bust up some pretty hard soils. And here's a picture of annual ryegrass. It gets a couple feet tall if you let it go in the springtime, but it's still manageable with a weed eater, even a lawnmower if you get out there in late March, early April and get that mowed off, and very easy to manage. Does a great job controlling weeds, and it's one I recommend quite a bit here for small gardeners. Germinates quickly, does good. Planting time on that is mid-August to mid-September, and usually about 1 pound per 1,000 square feet. You can cover it's a small seed if you got any way to rake it in. Again, in the spring, March, I'd go ahead and start mowing it with the lawnmower or taking a weed eater to it until you get it tilled and into the soil. We see a little bit of winter kills. We tend to see a lot warmer, wetter winters here lately, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of winter kill, but it can, we see some 0-degree weather for several days. It will kill out, but it doesn't tolerate heat well. That's why we plant it in the fall and use it as a winter cover crop. It does plant well with legumes such as a white clover. Does well with that too. Breaks down, helps break down heavy compacted soils. Like I said, it grows really dense and keeps the weed cover down as well. It comes up really easy. Doesn't require a whole lot of nutrient resource, so we don't have to worry about fertilizing it very much, but it's easy to establish and does really well. Legumes, if you're mixing some in, we're looking at probably putting 20% legumes or something in as well. and then this is talking about the nitrogen level somewhat of, looks like your highest nitrogen is before the bloom, and as it blooms out or seeds, the nitrogen that it's producing, of course, goes down. Talked about a lot of this already. Talked about brassicas and cereal rye and a lot of different cover crops out there available. But again, what we want to do is to cover that ground to keep soil erosion, weed control, and build up organic matter is what the goal of our cover crops are. Lots of times, years ago, cover crops got highly recommended, and a lot of your grandparents possibly, realize the benefit of cover crops, but that's kind of been lost over the last few years, and we want to try to bring that back and definitely build our soil health back up with cover crops. Choose a species that covers the ground, covers the soil quickly, keeps erosion down, and we talked about those. So something to keep in mind, getting those on pretty quick. We like to see those put on by mid-September. If we get up into October, getting those established is pretty tough, and I may recommend some different varieties when we get into that late season. If you give me a call and say, hey, I just now got my garden ready to put a cover crop on, and it's after mid-October, then we'll look at some other recommendations for varieties that are a little more tougher to stand that winter weather and establishing the colder soil temperatures, because we start losing our soil temperatures anytime after Labor Day. We'll see soil temperatures decreasing, which is a little tougher to get things established and to germinate. Some other good reasons: provides habitat for a lot of your wildlife, and like I said, as always, building up soil health and helps suppress the weeds. We may have sometimes even in our cold crops, or even with getting her established in September. Usually after we water it in once or twice, the cool nights and the heavy dews tend to help those keep going. I'm not a big advocate of watering crops on a daily basis. I've always recommend, if we see 2 to 3 weeks of dry weather, then we can get a little concerned and maybe look at watering crops. But once you start watering crops, a lot of times you'll need to water those pretty often, because the root systems tend to stay closer to the top of the soil. If we don't water, the root system will tend to go further in the ground and look for that water table and that the water source further down. So watering it in, getting it started, is important, but after that, it's established, it'll usually take off pretty good. Choosing cover crops, we talked about that some. And like I said, always give me a call if you have any more questions. Identifying what you want it to do, we talked about that: suppressing weeds, reducing erosion, those type of things. Sometimes cover crops are used even down the middle of rows during the summertime. We'll use them as a mulch surface, and folks, especially a lot of folks that use black plastic in the rows, they'll come back through with some ryegrass and plant in the middle of the row, and that helps. You can use it as a mulch and just go through every week and mow it off with a push mower, and that helps a lot with weed control as well, plus building up the soil. So that's an option for you too. If you're looking at next summer, you can use it as a mulch in your garden, cover crops. Selecting species, we talked about that some. Again, feel free to give me a call. And we know how important cover crops are for soil health, and we really encourage folks to put a cover crop on this fall. If you have any questions, like I said, give us a call here at the office. You know, this PowerPoint's on our website. The link to the survey for free cover crop seed will be available through September 15th. I'll go ahead and start calling folks as these surveys come in, let them come by and pick their cover crop seed up as soon as you get it completed, so you can get those on by mid-September. Again, if you have any questions about gardening, lawn care, anything like that, we're here to help. Give us a call here at the office, follow our Facebook page, and check out our website at any time. This will be available through mid-September, and as always, just give us a call if you have any questions or have any trouble linking up to it. We'll be glad to help you out. Thank you all for your time today, and until we have another class, we'll talk to you again next class. That's available probably on composting in a couple of weeks. Thank you.